Captain Sarachin stared at the navigation display, her coffee growing cold in her trembling hands. The stellar coordinates were correct. The gravitational readings matched perfectly. Even the faint radio signatures from the outer planets confirmed their location. But according to every official galactic database, chart, and navigation system in known space, they were floating in empty void. Earth didn't exist. Run the diagnostics again, she ordered her communications officer, Lieutenant Marcus Webb. His dark fingers danced across the holographic interface, sweat beading on his forehead despite the ship's control climate. Same result, Captain. The hegemony database has shown nothing but empty space at these coordinates. Sol system has been removed. Chen's mind raced through the implications. 3 weeks ago, Earth had been just another member world in the galactic hegemony, paying its taxes and tribute like every other colonized planet. Then came the compliance inspectors with their cold blue uniforms and emotionless faces. They'd arrived without warning, scanning everything from population records to atmospheric composition with their strange crystalline devices. The evacuation order came next. Immediate relocation required for galactic security purposes. The lead inspector had announced to the stunned United Earth Council, all human populations must relocate to designated sanctuary worlds within 72 standard hours. Most people had believed it was temporary, a bureaucratic mix-up that would be resolved in months, maybe a year. They'd packed their belongings and boarded the massive transport ships, leaving behind their homes, their history, their entire world. 7 billion people relocated across dozens of colony worlds, scattered like seeds in the cosmic wind. But Chun had smelled something rotten in the entire operation. As a veteran of the frontier wars, she'd learned to recognize the signs of a cover-up. The inspectors had been too efficient, too prepared. They'd known exactly how many ships they'd need, exactly which worlds could absorb Earth's displaced population. This wasn't a sudden security concern. It was a planned operation. So she'd stayed behind with her crew of 60 volunteers, hiding in the shadow of Jupiter's largest moon while the evacuation fleets departed. They watched the last transport disappear into hyperspace, leaving Earth seemingly empty and abandoned. That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, as they approached their homeworld in stealth mode, they discovered the true scope of hegemony's deception. Earth hadn't just been evacuated. It had been erased from existence itself. Captain, called Dr. Elena Vasquez from the science station, her voice tight with controlled panic. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from Earth's surface. Something's happening down there. Chin moved to the science console, her military training keeping her movement steady despite the growing dread in her chest. The readings made no sense. Vast geometric patterns of energy were pulsing across the planet's surface, invisible to optical sensors, but blazing like beacons in the electromagnetic spectrum. The patterns were too precise, too purposeful to be natural phenomena. How long have these readings been active? Chen asked. Unknown. They're not in any of our baseline scans from before the evacuation. But Captain, Vasquez hesitated, then pointed to a secondary display. These energy signatures are expanding. Whatever's generating them is getting stronger. Through the viewports, Earth looked deceptively normal. Blue oceans caught the light of the sun. White clouds swirled in familiar patterns, and the dark silhouettes of continents remained unchanged. But Chun could feel something wrong in the way space itself seemed to bend around their homeworld, as if reality was struggling to maintain its grip. Sir, Webb called out, his voice cracking slightly, I'm picking up transmissions from the planet's surface. They're not in any human language. The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Chun felt her crew's eyes on her, waiting for orders that might determine whether they'd live to see another day. She brought them here to uncover the truth about Earth's disappearance, but they'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than government conspiracy. Put the transmissions on speakers, she ordered. The sound that filled the bridge were unlike anything in human experience. Deep, resonant tones that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly through their bones. Harmonics that made their vision blur and their skin crawl. The sounds weren't random. They carried the unmistakable cadence of communication, of intelligence attempting to convey meaning across an impossible gulf of understanding. My God, whispered Dr. Vasquez. It's like the planet itself is trying to speak. Chin gripped the command chair's armrests until her knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed to her to order retreat, to flee back to civilized space and report their findings to the colonial authorities. But she knew that whatever was happening to Earth would follow them eventually. The hegemony hadn't just erased their world from the maps. They created a quarantine zone around something that was never meant to wake up. Set course for Earth orbit, she commanded. Full stealth protocols. We're going down there to find out what they were so afraid of. As their ship began its descent toward the planet that officially didn't exist, Chin couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by intelligences vast and patient, entities that had waited eons for the barriers protecting Earth to finally weaken. The energy patterns on the surface pulsed brighter, as if welcoming them home. The descent through Earth's atmosphere felt like falling through layers of increasingly thick syrup. Their ship's sensors registered normal air density and composition, but Chin could feel the resistance against their hull, as the space itself was becoming more viscous the closer they got to the surface. "Captain, the energy readings are off the charts," Dr. Vasquez reported, her fingers flying across the science console. "Whatever's generating these patterns is directly beneath major population centers. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, they're all showing massive subterranean activity." Chin studied the tactical display, showing Earth's major cities. From orbit, they'd appeared abandoned but intact, exactly as they'd been left 3 weeks ago. But the deep-range scanners revealed something else entirely. Beneath each city, vast chambers had opened in the bedrock, stretching down for kilometers into the planet's crust. The chambers pulsed with the same geometric energy patterns they detected from space. How is that possible? Lieutenant Webb asked from his station. Those excavations would have taken months, maybe years to complete. The evacuation was only 3 weeks ago. Unless they were already there, Chin replied grimly, hidden beneath our feet for who knows how long, waiting for the right moment to activate. Their destination was New York City. Chin had chosen it for practical reasons. The Hudson River provided a good landing approach, and Central Park offered cover from any potential surveillance. But as their ship settled down among the empty skyscrapers, she realized they'd chosen the epicenter of whatever was awakening on Earth. The silence outside was absolute. No birds, no insects, no wind stirring the abandoned streets. Even the city's normal background hum of electronics and machinery had ceased. It was as if New York had become a museum exhibit, perfectly preserved but utterly lifeless. "Away, team preparation," Chin announced over the ship's intercom. "Full environmental suits, maximum power cells, and emergency beacon activation every 15 minutes. We don't know what we're walking into down there." Dr. Vasquez joined her in the equipment bay along with Webb and Chief Security Officer Maria Santos, a compact woman whose calm demeanor masked years of combat experience. Each team member carried specialized scanning equipment, emergency medical supplies, and enough weaponry to handle most conventional threats. But Chin suspected that whatever they were about to face was far from conventional. The city streets felt like walking through a three-dimensional photograph. Cars sat abandoned exactly where their owners had left them during the evacuation, their doors still open, personal belongings scattered on the pavement. Shop windows displayed goods that would never be sold, their electronic signs frozen in mid-advertisement. The only movement came from papers and debris drifting in slow, hypnotic spirals, as if the air itself was moving in carefully choreographed patterns. Energy readings are strongest near Times Square. Vasquez reported through her suit's communication system. The source appears to be approximately 2 kilometers directly beneath the theater district. As they walked through the empty streets, Chin noticed subtle changes in their surroundings. Building shadows fell at impossible angles, creating geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Street lights flickered in synchronized sequences, forming complex mathematical progressions that seemed to carry meaning just beyond human comprehension. Even the abandoned vehicles had begun to arrange themselves in precise formations, as if guided by invisible hands. "Captain," Santos called out, her voice tight with professional concern. "We're being followed." Chin spun around, scanning the empty streets behind them. Nothing moved except the eternally drifting debris, but she could feel it too, a presence watching them from the shadows, intelligent and patient and utterly alien. "Thermal signatures?" she asked. "Negative." Whatever it is, it's not generating heat. But look at this. Santos pointed her scanner at a nearby building. The device's screen showed the structure's normal thermal outline, but superimposed over it was another pattern, a complex network of energy flowing through the building's framework like luminous veins. It's in everything, Vasquez breathed, scanning the surrounding area. The buildings, the streets, even the air itself. It's like the entire city has been converted into some kind of massive circuit board. They reached Times Square to find it transformed into something that belonged in no earthly city. The massive electronic billboards still functioned, but instead of advertisements, they displayed intricate mathematical formulas and star charts showing constellations that didn't exist in any human catalog. The formulas shifted and evolved as they watched, building toward some incomprehensible conclusion. At the center of the square, the pavement had cracked open in a perfect spiral pattern, revealing a shaft that descended into absolute darkness. The spiral was mathematically precise, its curves following equations that human mathematicians had theorized but never proven. Strange harmonics emanated from the depths, the same alien communication they'd heard from orbit, but now strong enough to make their bones ache. The shaft wasn't here during the evacuation, Webb said, consulting his database. I have satellite images from the day before the transports left. Times Square was completely normal. Then it opened recently, Chin replied, approaching the edge of the spiral. The question is what opened it. As if responding to her words, lights began to flicker in the depths of the shaft. Not electric illumination, but something that seemed to bend space around itself, creating pockets of visibility in the absolute darkness. The lights moved with purpose, ascending slowly toward the surface. Captain, we need to leave, Santos urged, her hand moving to her sidearm. Whatever's down there, it knows we're here. But Chin found herself transfixed by the ascending lights. They weren't random. They followed the same geometric patterns displayed on the billboards, the same mathematical progressions that had been guiding the city's transformation. Something vast and intelligent was communicating through pure mathematics, using the abandoned city as its canvas. Dr. Vasquez, she said softly, are you recording all of this? Every byte, Captain. But the data streams are unusual. My equipment is capturing information that shouldn't be possible to record. Dimensional measurements beyond our current understanding, temporal fluctuations, even what appears to be consciousness patterns. The lights in the shaft grew brighter, and Chin realized they were no longer ascending. They were emerging. The entities that emerged from the spiral shaft defied every human conception of life. They weren't creatures in any biological sense, but rather geometric constructs of living mathematics, their forms shifting between dimensions that human eyes could barely perceive. They moved like equations solving themselves in real time, their crystalline bodies folding through angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Chen's team backed away instinctively, weapons raised but useless against beings that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality. The entities paid them no attention at first, instead spreading throughout Times Square with purposeful movements, each one positioning itself at precise coordinates that formed a complex pattern visible only from above. They're not hostile, Dr. Vasquez whispered into her comm, her scanner readings fluctuating wildly as it tried to process the entity's exotic matter signatures. They're conducting some kind of ceremony. The beings began to pulse in synchronized sequences, their crystalline forms flashing with internal light that painted impossible colors across the abandoned billboards. The mathematical formulas displayed on the screens responded, evolving into increasingly complex configurations that seemed to describe the fundamental structure of reality itself. Chun felt something shift in her mind as she watched the display. The alien mathematics weren't just random equations. They were a form of communication, a language based on the underlying principles that govern space and time. And somehow, despite being completely foreign to human understanding, the concepts were beginning to make sense to her. Captain, Lieutenant Webb's voice carried a note of panic. I'm receiving transmissions from the other major cities. London, Tokyo, Mumbai. The same thing is happening everywhere. These entities are emerging simultaneously across the globe. The implications hit Chun like a physical blow. Whatever these beings were, they weren't just isolated to New York. They were coordinating a planet-wide operation, using Earth's major population centers as anchor points for something far larger than a simple emergence from underground chambers. One of the entities suddenly turned toward their group, its faceted form reorienting in impossible directions. Chen found herself staring into what might have been its face, a shifting kaleidoscope of geometric patterns that seemed to peer directly into her thoughts. When it spoke, the words bypassed her ears entirely, appearing as fully formed concepts in her consciousness. The barriers weaken. The quarantine fails. We reclaim what was stolen. Captain, did you hear that? Santos asked, her weapon still trained on the entity despite its apparent uselessness. You heard it too? Chen replied, never breaking eye contact with the being. It's not using sound. It's speaking directly to our minds. The entity pulsed brighter, and more concepts flooded Chen's awareness. Images of Earth as it had been millions of years ago, before the first humans had evolved. But it hadn't been empty then. Vast cities of crystalline spires had risen from the continents, populated by these same geometric beings. They had been Earth's first intelligent inhabitants, masters of mathematics and reality manipulation. Your species arrived as parasites, crude matter consuming refined energy. We withdrew to preserve the greater pattern. They're saying they lived here first. Chen translated for her team, struggling to process the alien concepts. Before humanity evolved, these beings were Earth's dominant species, but they went into some kind of hibernation when we appeared. More images flashed through her mind, the geometric beings retreating into vast underground chambers, sealing themselves away from what they perceived as humanity's chaotic influence. They had slept for millions of years, waiting for the right conditions to emerge again. The hegemony understood. They sought to preserve the pattern by removing the contamination. Chen's blood ran cold as the pieces fell into place. The hegemony hadn't evacuated Earth to protect humanity. They'd done it to protect these entities. Somehow, the Galactic government had known about Earth's original inhabitants and had orchestrated the evacuation to clear the way for their return. That's why they erased us from the maps, she said aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. They knew what would happen when these beings woke up. They were trying to contain it by making Earth officially non-existent. The entity's form shifted again, its mathematical patterns becoming more agitated. Around Times Square, its companions began moving faster, their coordinated dance taking on an urgency that made the air itself vibrate with tension. The contamination spreads beyond this world. The pattern must be restored before the corruption reaches the greater structure. New images flooded Chen's consciousness, not of Earth, but the galaxy itself. She saw the vast network of hyperspace routes that connected civilized worlds, the dimensional frameworks that allowed faster-than-light travel. But overlaid on this familiar map was something else, a geometric pattern of incredible complexity, a mathematical structure that encompassed the entire galactic arm. The beings weren't just reclaiming Earth. They were preparing to extend their influence throughout the galaxy, converting the crude matter-based civilizations of the hegemony into pure mathematical constructs. From their perspective, organic life was nothing more than static in an otherwise perfect equation. Dr. Vasquez, Chen ordered, "Are you getting any of this mental transmission?" "Fragments, Captain. My neural interface is picking up partial data streams. If I'm interpreting correctly, these entities view reality as a mathematical construct. They see organic life as errors in the code that need to be corrected." The entity pulsed again, and Chun felt a new concept being forced into her mind. The beings were offering humanity a choice. They could be converted into mathematical constructs like the entities themselves, achieving a form of digital immortality within the greater pattern. Or they could be deleted entirely, removed from the equation like any other error. Choose quickly. The pattern cannot wait for your primitive considerations. Around them, the abandoned city was continuing its transformation. The buildings were literally reshaping themselves into geometric forms, their concrete and steel flowing like liquid as they assumed mathematically perfect proportions. The process was accelerating, and Chen realized that soon there would be nothing left of the New York they'd known. "Captain," Webb called out urgently, "I'm receiving reports from our monitoring stations throughout the solar system. The effect is spreading beyond Earth. Mars and Venus are showing similar energy signatures." Chen's heart sank as she understood the full scope of what they were witnessing. The The geometric beings weren't just reclaiming Earth. They were preparing to convert the entire solar system into a single vast mathematical construct. And if they succeeded, their influence would inevitably spread to the other worlds of the galaxy. The hegemony's attempt at quarantine had failed. By erasing Earth from the maps, they'd only delayed the inevitable while giving these ancient entities time to strengthen their influence without interference. The being before her pulsed one final time, its message carrying the weight of an ultimatum. Decide now, join the pattern, or be deleted from it. There will be no other options. Chen stared at the geometric entity, her mind racing through impossible choices, while the city continued its mathematical transformation around them. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Vasquez frantically documenting the process, her scientific training overriding her terror as she recorded humanity's first contact with beings that viewed them as computational errors. "Captain," Santos urged, "we need to get back to the ship. If this effect is spreading to the other planets." "It won't matter," Chen interrupted, finally understanding the true scope of the situation. They're not just converting matter into energy patterns. They're rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in this region of space. Our ship, our weapons, even our bodies, everything operates according to rules they can change at will. The entity before her pulsed with what might have been impatience. Around Times Square, its companions had completed their positioning, forming a complex mandala of living mathematics that stretched across several city blocks. The pattern was beautiful in its alien perfection, but Chun could sense the immense power building within it. The primary node activates in moments. Choose your path. More images flooded her consciousness. Visions of what Earth would become once the transformation was complete. The planet would still exist, but as a perfectly ordered crystalline structure, its every atom arranged according to mathematical principles beyond human comprehension. The chaotic beauty of organic life will be replaced by geometric perfection, every element serving a specific function in a vast computational matrix. But within those visions, Chen glimpsed something the entities didn't expect her to notice. For all their mathematical perfection, they had made one crucial error in their calculations. They had assumed that humanity's impact on Earth was purely destructive, a contamination that needed to be cleansed. But the truth was far more complex. "Dr. Vasquez," she called out without taking her eyes off the entity, "you said these beings went into hibernation when humanity evolved. How long ago?" "Based on the geological evidence in their chambers, approximately 6 million years ago," Vasquez replied, her voice strained as she tried to maintain scientific objectivity while reality warped around them. Chen smiled grimly as the pieces fell into place. 6 million years of human evolution, of consciousness developing in chaotic, unpredictable ways that these mathematical beings couldn't comprehend. They saw humanity as static in their perfect equation, but they had failed to account for what that static had become. "Time expires. The pattern cannot wait." "You're wrong," Chen said aloud, addressing the entity directly. "Humanity isn't contamination in your pattern. We're evolution." The being's crystalline form flickered with what might have been confusion. Around them, the other entities paused in their coordinated dance, their perfect synchronization disrupted by this unexpected response. Chun pressed her advantage, drawing on concepts from the entity's own mental transmissions. "Your mathematics are perfect, but they're static. They haven't changed in millions of years because perfect systems can't evolve. But consciousness, chaotic, unpredictable consciousness, that's what drives evolution. That's what creates new possibilities." She gestured toward the transformed cityscape around them. "Look at what you've built here. It's mathematically perfect, but it's also completely predictable. Every angle, every proportion follows rules you established eons ago. There's no room for growth, for surprise, for the kind of breakthrough that comes from chaos interacting with order." The entity's form began to shift more rapidly, its geometric patterns becoming increasingly complex as it processed this unexpected concept. Chan could feel its confusion radiating to the mental link, and she realized that for the first time in millions of years, these beings were encountering something that didn't fit their calculations. Impossible. Chaos destroys pattern. Order creates stability. But chaos also creates novelty, Jin replied. Every human innovation, every work of art, every scientific breakthrough. They all came from the unpredictable interactions between ordered systems and chaotic consciousness. You've been sleeping for 6 million years, but we've been creating new forms of order you never imagined. Dr. Vasquez caught on to Chen's strategy. Captain's right, she called out, her scanner still recording the entity's reactions. Look at human technology. We've discovered mathematical relationships you never found because we approached them from directions your perfect minds couldn't conceive. The pattern in Times Square began to fluctuate as the entity's perfect synchronization continued to break down. Chun could sense doubt spreading through their network, a concept so alien to their nature that it was causing systemic errors in their coordination. You want to restore your pattern to the galaxy, Chun continued, but you're using the same mathematics you developed millions of years ago. The universe has evolved since then. New forms of complexity have emerged. You're trying to impose ancient solutions on problems that didn't exist when you went to sleep. Lieutenant Webb suddenly understood what Chin was attempting. The hegemony, he called out. They knew about you, which means they've encountered your kind before. How did that interaction go? Did your perfect mathematics account for the complexity of a galactic civilization? The entity's form began to pulse erratically, and Chin felt fragments of suppressed memories bleeding through their mental connection. Images of other worlds, other encounters with the geometric beings. But not all of those encounters had ended in mathematical conversion. Some had resulted in something else, something the entities had tried to forget. Previous implementations encountered anomalies. Local corrections were applied. Failures, Chin translated. You've tried this before and it didn't work. The complexity of evolved consciousness created variables you couldn't control. The other entities in the pattern were now visibly struggling to maintain their formation. Their perfect mathematical dance was breaking down as doubt and uncertainty. Concepts completely foreign to their nature spread through their network like a virus. Chun pressed forward, her voice growing stronger as she sensed their advantage. You have a choice too. You can try to impose your ancient pattern on a universe that's moved beyond it and watch it collapse under the weight of variables you can't calculate. Or you can evolve. Learn to incorporate chaos into your mathematics. Discover what 6 million years of consciousness evolution has created. The entity before her froze completely, its crystalline form locking into a static configuration as it processed this impossible concept. Around Times Square, the other beings began to flicker between dimensions. Their stable existence is suddenly uncertain. Evolution is chaotic. Chaos destroys pattern. Or chaos creates new patterns, Chin replied. Better patterns, more complex, more beautiful, more capable of handling the unexpected. That's what consciousness does. It finds new ways to organize reality. The transformation of the city suddenly halted. Buildings frozen halfway through their mathematical conversion. The energy patterns beneath their feet continued to pulse, but erratically now, as if the vast computational matrix was struggling to process data it had never been designed to handle. Chin realized they had reached a critical moment. The ancient entity's perfect certainty was cracking, but that might make them even more dangerous. Beings who had slept for millions of years in absolute mathematical confidence were now facing the possibility that their fundamental assumptions about reality might be wrong. What they did next would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of consciousness itself in the galaxy. The geometric entity before Chin began to resonate with harmonics that made reality itself seem to vibrate. Its crystalline form flickered rapidly between dimensions as it struggled to process concepts that challenged the very foundation of its existence. Around Times Square, the other beings were experiencing similar computational crises, their perfect mathematical certainty shattered by the possibility that chaos might not be an error to be corrected, but a feature to be embraced. Query: if chaos creates beneficial patterns, why did we withdraw? Our observations showed only destruction and inefficiency. Chun felt a moment of hope. The entity was asking questions rather than making pronouncements, a sign that their perfect certainty was genuinely breaking down. But she also sensed danger in the way the mathematical patterns beneath the city were fluctuating. These beings controlled forces that could reshape matter and energy at the quantum level. If they decided that the chaos of consciousness was too dangerous to allow, They could delete every thinking being in the galaxy with a thought. You withdrew because you were afraid, she said carefully, not of destruction, but of unpredictability. You'd achieved mathematical perfection, but perfection can't grow. Consciousness threatens perfection because it creates possibilities you can't calculate in advance. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scanner detecting massive energy buildups throughout the city. Captain, the entities are accessing archive data. They're reviewing their historical records, trying to reconcile their observations with our claims. The mental link between Chun and the entities suddenly expanded, flooding her consciousness with millennia of stored experiences. She saw Earth as it had been during the entity's early period of awareness, a young planet with simple mathematical relationships governing its geological and atmospheric processes. The geometric beings had imposed their ordered structures on this primitive world, creating vast crystalline cities that existed in perfect harmony with natural laws. But then something unexpected had happened. The first stirrings of organic chemistry had introduced variables that didn't follow their calculations. Simple cellular structures had begun evolving in directions the entities couldn't predict. Rather than adapting their mathematics to account for this new complexity, they had made a crucial error. They had interpreted evolution as a malfunction in their perfect system. We may have been premature in our assessment, the entity admitted, its mental voice carrying the weight of cosmic revelation. The organic processes we observed were creating new forms of mathematical relationships, but we classified them as errors because they didn't conform to our existing patterns. And now, Chen asked, sensing that they had reached a pivotal moment. The entity's form began to stabilize, but in a new configuration that incorporated elements of control chaos into its geometric structure. Around the square, the other beings were undergoing similar transformations, their rigid mathematical perfection evolving into something more flexible and dynamic. Now we must recalculate everything. The transformation of New York suddenly reversed itself, but not back to its original state. Instead, the city began reshaping into something entirely new, a hybrid architecture that combined human creativity with mathematical precision. Buildings flowed into curves that satisfied both aesthetic and structural requirements, their forms following equations that incorporated the chaotic variables of human consciousness. It's beautiful, Dr. Vasquez breathed, her scanner readings showing stable integration between organic and geometric principles. They're not trying to delete chaos anymore. They're incorporating it into their mathematics. Lieutenant Webb was monitoring communications from around the globe. Captain, the same process is happening everywhere. The entities in other cities are also beginning to integrate rather than replace. But we're receiving some concerning signals from space. Chun felt her moment of hope temper with new anxiety. The hegemony? Multiple fleets converging on the Sol system. They're not here to negotiate, Captain. They're coming to implement a final solution. The entity before Chun pulsed with sudden alarm as it accessed galactic communication networks and discovered the approaching threat. The external powers seek to destroy both patterns rather than allow integration. They fear what we might become together. The truth of the situation crystallized in Chen's mind like a cold, hard equation. The hegemony had never intended the evacuation to be temporary. They had relocated Earth's human population not to protect them, but to clear the way for what they believed would be the complete destruction of both humanity and the geometric entities. The Galactic government had concluded that the risk of either species surviving was too great to allow. How long until the fleets arrive? Chen asked Webb. 6 hours, Captain. And they're not carrying evacuation ships this time. Those are planet killers. The entity's mental voice carried a note of grim determination. Then we must demonstrate the value of our integration before they can act. Captain Chun, will your species accept a true partnership? Not conversion, but collaboration? Chun looked at her team, seeing fear and hope warring in their expressions. They had come here to uncover the truth about Earth's disappearance, but they had discovered something far more significant. The possibility of a new form of existence that combined the best aspect of order and chaos. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. A merger of consciousness types. Humans would retain their chaotic creativity and unpredictability, but gain access to our mathematical precision and reality manipulation abilities. We would gain the capacity for evolution and growth that our perfection had denied us. Dr. Vasquez consulted her readings. Captain, the energy pattern suggests it's possible. The entities aren't trying to overwrite human consciousness. They're trying to create a symbiotic relationship. And if we refuse? Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Then the approaching fleets will destroy us all, and the galaxy will lose both the stability of our mathematics and the innovation of your chaos. The universe will be poorer for our absence. Chun made her decision with the same quick certainty that had carried her through the frontier wars. Dr. Vasquez, contact every human survivor you can reach throughout the solar system. Explain the situation and ask for volunteers. Lieutenant Webb, prepare a transmission to the approaching fleets. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it openly. And Chief Santos, she added, turning to her security officer, prepare our ship for the integration process. If this works, we're going to need to show the galaxy what humanity and these beings can accomplish together. The entity pulsed with something that might have been gratitude. The integration will begin with willing participants. Those who choose to remain purely human will be protected, but they must understand that they are choosing to limit their potential. As the process began, Chen felt her consciousness expanding in ways she had never imagined possible. Her human creativity and intuition remained intact, but now they were supported by mathematical understanding that allowed her to perceive reality at quantum levels. She could feel the other volunteers around the globe undergoing similar transformations, each person retaining their essential humanity while gaining capabilities that transcended the limitations of purely biological existence. When the hegemony fleets arrived 6 hours later, they found something that shattered their carefully calculated expectations. Earth had not been destroyed or converted. It had evolved into something entirely new. The planet pulsed with integrated human geometric consciousness, its inhabitants demonstrating capabilities that combined the best of both evolutionary paths. The fleet commanders found themselves facing not the primitive chaos they had expected to eliminate, nor the rigid mathematical perfection they had feared, but a hybrid civilization that could adapt to any challenge while maintaining the stability to build lasting solutions. As Chen stood in the transformed Times Square, her expanded consciousness linked to billions of other integrated beings across the planet and throughout the solar system. She smiled at the irony of the situation. The hegemony had tried to erase Earth from their maps, but instead they had created the conditions for humanity's greatest evolutionary leap. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, came the collective thought of the integrated consciousness, is exactly what evolution is supposed to do. Chat Control Sonnet 4.